Welcome back to Otaku Sensaku. If you have been paying attention to the so-called culture war surrounding gaming, comics, and nerd culture for the last decade, you know the script by heart. It is a predictable, almost algorithmic cycle of manufactured hysteria. A piece of media is announced or released. Perhaps it features a woman with visible muscularity and agency. Maybe it centers on a black samurai in a historical setting. Or perhaps it simply acknowledges the statistical reality that gay people exist and have romantic lives. Immediately, a cottage industry of outrage merchants spins up their webcams. They flood YouTube with thumbnails featuring red laser eyes and crying SJWs, screaming about the woke mind virus destroying Western civilization. For years, this has been an incredibly lucrative business model. It relies on a very specific, predatory feedback loop. Isolate a vulnerable, often young and male audience, tell them that their childhood nostalgia and identity are under attack by a shadowy cabal of feminists, Marxists, and tourists, and then sell them the solution, which usually involves subscribing to a Patreon, buying a supplement, or backing a crowdfunding campaign for a book that may never arrive. But something fascinating is happening in the anti-woke sphere right now. The grift is running out of steam. The returns on manufactured outrage are diminishing because the apocalypse they keep predicting never actually happens. Video games haven't been destroyed, they are bigger than ever. Woke movies keep coming out, and like a starving snake trapped in a cage of its own making, the movement has begun to eat its own tail. Today, we're looking at a video by Jon Del Arroz, a science fiction writer and commentator who has decided that the biggest threat to conservatism isn't the left, Disney, or Kathleen Kennedy anymore. In his eyes, the new enemy is other anti-woke YouTubers who aren't hateful enough. This is a case study in what I call a purity spiral, the inevitable moment where a reactionary movement, having run out of external enemies to scapegoat, turns inward to purge its own ranks of anyone deemed insufficiently radical. Let's watch the snake take its first bite.
Fandom is really a mistake. And the entire point of it in the culture is to just replace religion, and that's what ends up happening here. But this has happened in a weird situation in recent years where people have followed influencers like it's some kind of cult.
Fandom is a mistake because it replaces religion. This is a fascinating, almost mask-off admission of the authoritarian mindset that underpins this entire worldview. For years, I have analyzed how reactionary movements project their own dogmatism onto everyone else. They treat media criticism not as art analysis, but as blasphemy law. To JDA, the act of being a fan, of finding community, identity, or just simple joy in a piece of secular media is a threat because it competes with religious submission. When normal people engage with Star Wars, Star Trek, or Warhammer, they're exercising agency. They're interpreting art, writing fan fiction, shipping characters, and engaging in a death of the author relationship with the text, where they decide what the story means to them. That is secular joy. It is messy, it is democratic, and it is uncontrolled. It is a space where people explore ideas, identities, and morality without a central authority dictating the conclusion. To a fundamentalist like JDA, this is terrifying. He doesn't want you to have agency in how you consume art. He wants you to have a dogma. He's admitting here that he views culture not as a playground for imagination, but as a battleground for spiritual warfare. If you aren't engaging with media through a lens of religious fundamentalism, you are spiritually lost. He hates fandom because he hates the idea that you might find meaning, community, or purpose without a priest class telling you what that meaning is. He is projecting his own cult-like devotion to tradition on people who just want to enjoy a video game, assuming that if they're not worshiping his God, they must be worshiping something else, because he cannot conceive of a mind that is free from submission. But here's where the paranoia really sets in. He claims that the influencers, specifically the anti-woke ones who built this ecosystem, have formed a whisper network to gatekeep him.
And the influencers who were supposed to be counterculture, against cancel culture, against wokeism, against left-wing politics, have all formed this kind of like weird whisper network.
Let's stop there for a second. The whisper network. He is appropriating terminology usually reserved for victims of sexual abuse, protecting each other from predators, and he is applying it to YouTube drama. He is accusing the Geeks plus Gamers crew, the very people who spent years harassing Brie Larson, screaming about forced diversity, and mobilizing the internet against woke content, of being part of a leftist conspiracy to silence him. This is the inherent paranoia in conspiratorial thinking. When your entire worldview is based on the idea that a secret cabal is controlling everything, eventually you have to explain why you aren't winning. If you believe your ideology is the silent majority, then the only reason you aren't dominating the culture is sabotage. It can't be that he's tired of the negativity. It can't be that his content isn't appealing. It must be a conspiracy. This reveals the inherent weakness of the reactionary mindset. They view themselves as the protagonists of reality. If the script isn't going their way, it's not because the audience walked out, it's because the theater is rigged. This whisper network accusation is just a way for him to cope with his own irrelevance without engaging in any self-reflection.
And they try to just tear down right-wing and Christian creators in these spaces as the process. We've seen it going all year long, and it spun out of the Gamergate 2 situation last year.
He explicitly frames this as an attack on Christian creators. This is the pivot to theocracy. To JDA, if you aren't supporting his specific brand of content, you aren't just a bad consumer. You are attacking his faith. It is the ultimate shield against criticism. But let's apply a materialist analysis here. Why are channels like Geeks and Gamers distancing themselves from people like JDA? Is it a conspiracy? Is it a whisper network? No, it is capitalism doing what capitalism does. The algorithm he complains about isn't the leftist plot, it's a market mechanism. The reality is that the hardcore, fundamentalist, anti-woke content has a ceiling. There are only so many people willing to be angry 24/7. Eventually, the audience gets exhausted. Channels like Geeks and Gamers are businesses. They drift toward the center, not because they became woke or saw the light, but because they like money. They realize that to grow, they have to normalize. Screaming about pronouns eventually becomes unprofitable, and being associated with radioactive extremists like JDA, who demand total ideological purity, becomes a liability to their bottom line. JDA is witnessing the free market, the very system he likely claims to support, rejecting his product. But instead of adapting, he screams persecution. This is the irony of the anti-cancel culture crowd. They demand a guaranteed platform and audience, and when the market decides to move on, they claim they are being oppressed.
You saw people like Smash JT talk about how he's actually for transgenderism and LGBTQ crap, as he then pivoted away and just started covering drama. You've seen Geeks and Gamers do much the same. They've done the same the whole way through. We're actually more diverse than Hollywood. Those words rang around the world. And this has happened for a long, long time.
LGBTQ crap. Let's pause on that phrase. That is the level of intellectual rigor we are dealing with here. It's not a critique of writing quality. It's not an analysis of plot integration. It is pure, distilled dehumanization. This moment highlights the central mechanism of the purity spiral. In a radical movement, status is gained by being more extreme than the person next to you. It is not enough to be conservative. It is not enough to hate Disney. It is not enough to criticize bad writing. If you show even a shred of basic human empathy, if you admit that trans people exist, or if you say, hey, maybe our group is actually diverse, you are cast out. JDA frames this as a betrayal. I frame it as the inevitable result of a movement built entirely on exclusion. The grifters at the top of the food chain, the ones running the big channels, are cynical operators. They know that to survive on YouTube, they occasionally have to pretend to be reasonable. They have to say, we aren't bigots, we just want good stories, to maintain plausible deniability to advertisers and new viewers. But JDA is a true believer. He's the guy who says the quiet part out loud. He is angry that they are hiding their power level. He perceives their attempt to appeal to a broader market as a surrender to the enemy. He demands that every piece of media consumption be an act of political affirmation. You cannot just watch a movie. You must watch a movie that actively hates the people he hates. Anything less is crap.
And as you can see, Geeks and Gamers did this review just cheering on the lesbian sex, which I did a video on saying, hey guys, they went full woke and they actually just forced this lesbian agenda on everybody.
Notice the language here. Forced lesbian agenda. I need to deconstruct this framing because it is the bedrock of anti-woke criticism. To people like JDA, the mere depiction of consenting adult women expressing sexuality is an act of aggression. He calls it forced. But who is doing the forcing? The writers who exercise their creative freedom to write a scene, or the moral scolds like JDA who want to sanitize art to fit a patriarchal religious standard. This reveals a profound violence-sexuality asymmetry in their worldview. These are the same people who will defend gritty, hyper-violent content as mature and edgy. They will argue that seeing a man's head cut off in a video game is just free speech, or that depictions of war crimes are necessary for realism. But the moment two women kiss or a character expresses a non-normative sexual identity, it is suddenly propaganda, grooming, or agenda-driven. Why does this asymmetry exist? Because they view female sexuality solely through the lens of male ownership. In their framework, women exist to be won, protected, or objectified by men. If a lesbian relationship exists in a story, it excludes the male gaze and the male participant. It isn't serving him, therefore it must be an attack on him. I reject this. I view natural, consenting adult sexuality as a healthy, normal part of the human experience that deserves to be depicted in art. Conversely, the glorification of extreme violence is objectively more harmful to the human psyche. Yet that is the content JDA defends while clutching his pearls over a kiss. He doesn't want good writing, he wants a safe space where his specific moral sensibilities are never challenged.
They're trying in these circles not to cast any judgment on the LGBTQ community, on leftist causes, on Black Lives Matter, Black replacement characters. They're trying to just be very, very centrist about things, which is left-wing, in order to appeal to that Google algorithm.
He says this with contempt, not cast any judgment. This is the core of the issue. JDA believes that the function of a true conservative creator is to actively judge and condemn their neighbors. He was offended that Geeks and Gamers are choosing, even for cynical reasons, to adopt a live and let live attitude. I, and honestly, anyone who values liberty should champion agency. I believe that adults can handle depictions of sexuality, queer or otherwise, without the sky falling. JDA views not casting judgment as a negative. Think about that. He is angry that his peers aren't being bigoted enough. He is demanding that they actively judge, condemn, and gatekeep. This is the ultimate form of paternalism. He believes that the audience needs to be protected from deviant thoughts. He is advocating for a Heckler's veto, where his personal discomfort dictates what art is allowed to exist. He wants to institutionalize his personal morality into the marketplace. He is angry that Geeks and Gamers are refusing to enforce that veto because they realize it makes them look like weirdos to the average person. JDA is essentially arguing for a self-imposed Hays Code, where immoral content is suppressed not by the government, but by a mob of angry YouTubers. He treats his audience like children who cannot be trusted to view lesbian content without being corrupted. It is an infantile worldview that fears the complexity of the real world.
In an attempt to affirm that this LGBTQ thing was part of their community. Now, of course, on their news website, they are pushing this kind of agenda, saying it's a good thing in the Apple TV programming, when, of course, this is the same woke content that they got big to fight against.
And there it is. The Ouroboros eats its tail. JDA captures the tragedy of his own existence in this clip. He says, this is the same woke content that they got big to fight against. He is realizing that the monster he helped create has outgrown him. The anti-woke influencers built an audience on outrage. They spent a decade training their followers to react like Pavlovian dogs to any sign of diversity. But now, they are trapped in that cage. If they evolve, if they show empathy, or if they just want to enjoy a piece of media that happens to have a gay character, the ideological framework they built turns on them. They created a purity test that they themselves can no longer pass. JDA thinks he is the hero of the story, the last pure conservative standing against the Whisper Network and the traitors. In reality, he's just a guy shouting at the clouds while the world moves on. He is a relic of a culture war that is slowly becoming irrelevant because normal people are realizing that a black elf in Lord of the Rings didn't actually ruin their life. This is the inevitable fate of all reactionary movements. Because they define themselves by what they are against rather than what they are for, they must constantly find new things to be against. Eventually, they run out of external targets and turn on each other. It is a miserable, lonely way to view art and community.
Because our principles are very, very true. So sign up for fandompulse.com. It's so important. Get on a subscription, get a paid subscription, and support us today, guys. This is where we're building the future of the culture war.
Finally, look at the pivot. After spending 15 minutes attacking his allies for selling out, what does he do? He sells you his own alternative. Don't listen to them, they are compromised. Listen to me. Buy my books. Subscribe to my newsletter. This proves that the outrage isn't about morality, it's about market share. He isn't mad that geeks and gamers are woke. He's mad that they're cornering the market on nerd culture and leaving him behind. It is a desperate clawing for relevancy in an economy that is moving on. He's trying to fracture the audience so he can rule over a smaller, more radicalized fiefdom. The truth is, feminism, inclusivity, and wokeness aren't a conspiracy to destroy games. They're simply the recognition that culture belongs to everyone, not just a shrinking demographic of angry reactionaries. The market is shifting because the audience is shifting. People want new stories. They want diverse characters. They want complexity. They want strong, competent female archetypes who drive the plot, not just damsels waiting to be saved. And as I can see from this video, even the grifters are starting to realize that hate is a non-renewable resource. You can only burn the house down so many times before you're left standing in the ashes, wondering why no one wants to come over for dinner anymore. Ultimately, this cannibalization we are witnessing isn't just a drama cycle. It is the death rattle of a worldview that has nothing left to offer but resentment. While they fight over who is the most pure, the rest of us are moving forward. We are engaging with art that challenges us, stories that represent the real world, and media that treats us like adults. We reject the idea that we need to be protected from ideas. We reject the idea that fandom is a religion, and we reject the idea that empathy is a weakness. If you appreciate that kind of perspective, if you want commentary that dissects the culture war rather than profiting from it, and if you value agency over comfort, then I need your help to keep this channel growing. The algorithm loves the kind of rage bait we just criticized, which means channels like this one rely entirely on community support. If you like this video, please hit that like button. It is the single best way to tell YouTube that there is an audience for nuanced leftist critique. I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you noticed other creators quietly pivoting away from the anti-woke grift? Let me know what you've seen. And finally, if you wouldn't mind, please hit the subscribe button. Join us as we reclaim nerd culture from the reactionaries one video at a time. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.